The truth is far more surprising than anyone imagined, and it might just change how you see the show forever. And what about that explosive season finale? Why did it end the way it did? Stay with us, because this isn't just a season finale. It's about the untold truth behind one of America's most cherished shows. A simple story became a television treasure, long before reality TV, viral TikTok stars, or funny sitcoms with loud laugh tracks. There was a show called Little House on the Prairie. If you were around in the 1970s, you probably know relatable, comforting, regular TV shows. They were something special that stayed on the air for almost 10 years. It told the story of the Ingalls family, a simple but hard-working family living on the American frontier. The father, Charles Ingalls, was played by actor Michael Landon. He was kind, wise, and strong. He was the heart of the show. When Little House on the Prairie started in 1974, it quickly became a favorite in many homes across America. Families loved watching it together because it struck an emotional chord with viewers. It was relatable, comforting, and full of life lessons about doing the right thing. The show was based on books written by Laura Ingalls Wilder. She told true stories from her childhood growing up in a small wooden house with her parents and sisters. The show brought those memories to life, from huge snowstorms and wildfires to happy times and sad ones. One episode might make you laugh, and the next could make you cry. But through it all, love, faith, and family always helped them get through the tough times. The show lasted for 9 seasons and had a total of 200 forced episodes. That's a lot of stories from the Prairie. During that time, Little House on the Prairie became one of the most loved shows on TV. And here's something that made it really stand out. The show didn't avoid serious or difficult topics. It talked about real-life problems like racism, substance and alcohol abuse, poverty, bullying, and even death. But it handled these issues carefully in a way that touched people's hearts without being too harsh. That's why so many viewers remembered those episodes even years later. By the late 1970s, the cast felt like a real family, not just on screen but behind the scenes too. They spent so much time together that their bond became strong. Michael Landon, who played the father, made sure everyone on set felt supported. He wanted the stories to be real and emotional, and he expected everyone to put their heart into their work. Many fans thought the show would go on forever, but then it ended. And not just any ending, it ended shockingly and unforgettably. At the center of everything was Michael Landon. Most people knew him as the kind and loving Charles Ingalls on the show, but behind the scenes, he did much more than act. He was also the main writer, the director, and the executive producer. That means he helped create the whole show from start to finish. Every episode, every storyline, and every piece of dialogue had his input. In many ways, Little House on the Prairie was a part of Michael Landon's heart and mind. So why would someone who cared so much about the show choose to end it in such a shocking way? And why was the show canceled at all, especially when it still had a lot of loyal fans who loved it? At first, no one really knew the full answer. Some people thought it was because the ratings were going down. Others believed the TV network just wanted something new. But years later, the real reason finally came out, and it surprised a lot of people. In this video, we're going to explore what really happened behind the scenes of Little House on the Prairie. From its early success to the quiet problems that started growing backstage, and finally, the surprising truth behind why the show ended the way it did. But before we get to that revelation, we need to understand the man who made it all happen. Michael Landon was more than a TV star. He was a storyteller, a leader, and someone with very personal reasons for how Little House came to an end. The man behind Charles Ingalls. Before Michael Landon ever became Charles Ingalls to millions of television viewers, he was just a boy named Eugene Maurice Orowitz. Born on October 31, 1936, in Forest Hills, Queens, New York, Landon's early life was far from picture-perfect. His father was a publicist for a theater company, and his mother was an actress. While it might sound like an exciting household, Michael's childhood was deeply affected by his mother's emotional challenges. He later revealed that she attempted to end it all multiple times during his youth, something that left emotional scars he carried throughout his life. Michael was a quiet and sensitive child. He didn't have many friends, and he often felt like an outsider. His family eventually moved to Collingswood, New Jersey, where he spent most of his teenage years. It was there, in high school, that he discovered his talent for athletics, particularly javelin throwing. That talent earned him a scholarship to the University of Southern California. However, a serious injury ended his sports career before it even truly began. This turn of events pushed Landon toward a different path, acting. He began taking small roles in television and film in the 1950s. He changed his name to Michael Landon after spotting it in a phone book, thinking it sounded more like a Hollywood actor. His big break came in 1959 when he landed the role of Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza, one of the longest-running westerns in American TV history. He stayed on Bonanza for 14 years and became a household name. But what set him apart wasn't just his acting. It was his growing interest in writing and directing. Landon was ambitious, and more importantly, he wanted control over the stories he told. That control would become a defining trait in his later career. When Bonanza ended, Landon didn't slow down. Instead, he started developing a new project called Little House on the Prairie. Michael Landon brought a modern emotional depth to the show. He didn't just act in the series. He directed dozens of episodes, wrote many scripts, and served as the executive producer. This was rare in television at the time. Most actors showed up, delivered their lines, and went home. But Landon treated the show like it was his responsibility. He believed in the values it portrayed: family, hard work, faith, and moral strength. And he wanted to make sure those values came through clearly in every episode. On set, Michael was known for being a strict leader. Some described him as demanding, but many of his co-stars also spoke of his kindness and loyalty. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura Ingalls, often referred to him as a father figure in real life. She once said, "He was more than a TV dad. He was a real dad to me." Landon cast many young actors and often supported them beyond the screen, guiding them not just in acting, but in life. Meanwhile, not everyone found working with him easy. Some actors felt his need for control made collaboration difficult. He often made creative adjustments during filming, which some found challenging, especially as he did not seek their opinion. But even his critics admitted that the final product, the show itself, was always heartfelt and deeply genuine. That's because for Landon, Little House on the Prairie wasn't just entertainment. It was a way of expressing his beliefs, his ideals, and even his pain. As the years went by, the show evolved. Children on the show grew up, new characters were introduced, and the town of Walnut Grove began to change. Landon stayed committed, though, directing more episodes and continuing to play Charles well into the later seasons. However, behind the scenes, challenges were beginning to build, both with the network and within the production itself. Behind the curtains of Walnut Grove. By the time Little House on the Prairie had been on TV for several years, it was already one of America's favorite shows. Millions of people watched it every week, and it became a big success for the NBC network. On screen, life in Walnut Grove seemed peaceful and full of love. But behind the scenes, things weren't always as perfect as they looked. In the early seasons, the cast and crew worked well together and created a strong sense of family on set. After the show ended, many cast members expressed how much they missed being part of it. But as the show went on, new problems began to appear. One big issue came from the network, NBC. As the 1970s turned into the 1980s, TV audiences were changing. Viewers wanted faster stories, more action, and more drama. New shows were bolder and sometimes more intense. NBC started pressuring Michael Landon to make Little House more exciting and modern to keep up with the times. But Michael resisted those charges. He believed in simple emotional stories that focused on family values and kindness. He didn't want to add dramatic twists just to get attention or boost ratings. He felt that Little House had a clear message, and he wanted to protect that. This put him in conflict with NBC more and more often. At the same time, some actors on the show were starting to feel left out. Karen Grassell, who played Carolyn Ingalls, later shared that she felt like her role got smaller in the later seasons. She even had arguments with Landon about her pay. Other cast members also noticed that the show focused a lot on Charles and Laura, while their characters didn't get as much attention. It wasn't because Michael was selfish. It was more that he wanted to stick closely to the story he believed in. But it still caused some tension. There was also the problem of the show's long schedule. Michael Landon worked very hard and didn't take many breaks. He expected the same from everyone else. This helped keep the show running smoothly, but it also made people tired. The long hours and pressure to do everything just right made it hard for some cast and crew to keep up. Another challenge was that the children on the show were growing up. Laura wasn't the little girl in pigtails anymore. Mary had gotten married and left the town. The show had to change with the characters, but not all fans liked that. Some viewers missed the early, simpler stories and started tuning out. Slowly, the show's ratings began to drop. To try and fix this, Michael and the network changed the show's name in 1979 to Little House, A New Beginning. The story now focuses more on Laura and her husband, Almanzo, as they raise their own family. Michael wasn't in front of the camera as much, and he also let go of some control behind the scenes. But even with these changes, things didn't return to how they used to be. Recapturing the original charm proved difficult. During this time, Landon was also going through problems in his personal life. He and his second wife, Lynn, were getting divorced after 19 years of marriage. The news made headlines, and the emotional stress may have affected how he worked on the show. Some of the later episodes started to feel darker and more serious. Topics like death, addiction, and unfair treatment were shown more directly than before. Even with all these challenges, Michael never gave up on Little House. He still loved the show and the message it carried. He didn't want the network to cancel it without giving it a proper goodbye. He wanted to be the one to decide how it would end. That's why, when the time came, Michael Landon made a bold decision. He planned a final episode that would make sure no one could ever forget the show. And he wanted to make sure that if Little House had to end, it would go out on his terms, not anyone else's. The build-up had been slow but powerful. The creative tension, the personal struggles, the changing audience, all of it led to one final, unforgettable moment. No one expected what was coming next. The ending Michael created would become one of the most shocking finales in television history. The shocking final goodbye. By the middle of the 1980s, Little House on the Prairie had ended its regular weekly episodes. After 9 seasons and hundreds of powerful moments, NBC decided to close the book on the beloved show. But Michael Landon wasn't ready to say goodbye just yet. He had one last story to tell, a final goodbye that fans would never forget. This final story came as a made-for-TV movie called Little House: The Last Farewell. It aired on February 6, 1984. For many fans, it was a special but sad moment. They were excited to see the characters one more time, but no one expected how the story would end. The people of Walnut Grove face losing their town to a rich man, but instead of giving it up, they decide to destroy it themselves. Most people thought the final episode would end with a big speech, a court fight, or maybe a happy surprise where the town is saved. But Michael Landon had something completely different in mind. In a surprising twist, the people of Walnut Grove make a huge decision. If they can't keep their town, then no one else should have it either. So, one by one, they blow up the buildings, their homes, their stores, and even their church, leaving nothing behind. Fans watching at home were shocked. Why would such a kind, loving show end with everything being destroyed? To Michael Landon, it wasn't just about tearing down buildings, it was about powerfully ending the story. He wanted control over how the series ended. He wanted it to be clear that this was truly the end. He also wanted to send a message, not just to the fans, but to the network and the television industry as a whole. Michael Landon didn't want Little House on the Prairie to be brought back years later in a way that didn't feel right. He didn't want spin-offs, reboots, or new versions that didn't stay true to the show's message. By blowing up Walnut Grove, he made sure that anyone who tried to bring the show back would have to deal with that powerful ending. It was like putting a big, bold period at the end of the sentence, one that no one could ignore. The most shocking part was that he didn't just burn down the buildings in movies. He also did it in real life. But there was a practical reason behind this choice. The set for the show had been built at a place called Big Sky Ranch in California. It had been used for many years, and now that the show was over, the set was going to be taken down anyway. So instead of just removing the buildings quietly, Landon decided to turn them into something meaningful, a dramatic moment that would live on forever. But the deeper reason was personal. For Michael Landon, Little House on the Prairie was more than just a TV show. It was a big part of his life. He had written it, directed it, acted in it, and helped shape every episode. The show reflected his values, his challenges, and the things he believed in, like love, kindness, and standing up for what's right. So when the show ended, it wasn't just the end of a job. It felt like the end of a chapter in his own life. And he wanted that ending to be powerful, emotional, and unforgettable. Still, people wondered for years, why? Why would he go that far? Why destroy the whole town when he could have just ended the story quietly? Maybe it was because he wanted to protect the legacy of Little House. Maybe it was because he was dealing with personal struggles. Or maybe he just knew that the best way to say goodbye is to leave a lasting memory, one that no one would ever forget. Michael Landon breaks his silence on why he ended the show. For years, fans have wondered why Little House on the Prairie ended the way it did. The big finale, the town being destroyed, and the quiet goodbye all felt so sudden. People wondered if it was because of low ratings, or maybe Michael Landon was tired, or if something deeper was going on. At first, Michael Landon didn't explain much, but later, in interviews and public talks, he finally opened up, and what he said surprised his fans. Let's start with the obvious guess. Ratings. By season 9, the show's audience was getting smaller. Not by much, but enough for NBC to start thinking about new kinds of shows. TV in the 1980s was changing, and people wanted big cities, fast stories, and younger casts. The quiet, simple life in Walnut Grove didn't quite fit anymore. But here's the twist. NBC didn't cancel Little House. Michael Landon did. Yeah, you heard right. According to Landon, the network still wanted to keep the show going. They had already changed the name to Little House, A New Beginning, with Laura and Almanzo as the main characters. NBC hoped they could keep the story going without Landon, but Landon refused. In interviews with People magazine and the Archive of American Television, Landon explained his choice. They said, "I didn't want somebody else coming in and picking up the story where we left off, doing it differently, without the heart we put into it. That would have felt like a betrayal, not just to me, but to the audience." To him, Little House wasn't just a show. It was something he poured his heart into. He knew how TV worked. He had seen networks take over shows, change characters, and turn meaningful stories into something shallow. And he didn't want that to happen to Little House. So when NBC showed interest in keeping the show alive without him, he made a bold choice to end it completely. That's why he returned for the last farewell. Even though he wasn't the main star anymore, he came back, not just to play Charles Ingalls one last time, but to make sure the show ended his way. In another interview with TV Guide, Landon said something powerful. "I destroyed the town because I didn't want them to destroy the memory. It wasn't just about blowing up buildings. It was about protecting something special." It didn't end there. Michael Landon was exhausted. Running the show for 9 years had taken a lot out of him mentally, emotionally, and physically. He later said he didn't expect the show to air for that long. He gave everything he had to Little House. And when it was time to let go, he wanted to let go completely. Looking back, people now see his decision with more understanding. It was dramatic and heartbreaking. It was also brave and honest. Today, in a world full of TV reboots and remakes, Little House on the Prairie still stands untouched. It remains just as it was, warm, simple, emotional, and real. Because Michael Landon made sure it would. Let's step away from the prairie fields and take a look at what happened to Landon after Little House ended. How he disappeared and how his personal struggles changed the way we remember the man behind the walnut grove. Michael Landon's last days, a quiet goodbye. After giving the world years of love, hope, and heart through Little House on the Prairie, Landon faced a very hard moment in life. In April 1991, he was told he had a very serious kind of cancer called pancreatic cancer, and it had already spread to his liver. It was a big shock to many because Michael was always so full of life, laughter, and strength. But instead of hiding from the world, he did something brave. He sat down on national television and spoke openly about what he was facing. He told the world he didn't want this to be the end. Those simple words touched millions of people. He wasn't trying to be a hero, he was simply being honest. During his last few months, Michael stayed at home with his wife Cindy and his children. He wasn't acting, writing, or directing anymore. It's just a quiet house filled with love, family, and memories. Even while in pain, Michael still smiled, still laughed, and still showed love to the people around him. Friends said he stayed strong to the very end, and that he never lost the kindness that made him who he was. On July 1st, 1991, Michael passed away at just 54 years old. The news hit hard. People cried not just because they lost a famous actor, but because it felt like they lost a father, a friend, and a guide. However, his work didn't fade. If anything, it grew. Little House on the Prairie became more than a show. It became a reminder of what matters most. What is it about this old prairie show that still pulls at people's hearts? Why are new generations watching? And how did Michael Landon create something that time couldn't erase? Legacy of the Prairie. How Little House lives on. Even though Little House on the Prairie officially ended in 1984, its story didn't fade away with the final credits, nor with the dynamite that took down Walnut Grove. In fact, in many ways, Little House became even more powerful after it went off the air. And that's the beauty of it. Michael Landon may have blown up the town to protect the heart of the show, but what he did was create something that could never be destroyed, a legacy rooted in love, simplicity, and truth. After all these years, Little House on the Prairie continues to reach new audiences, move longtime fans to tears, and remind people of the kind of values that never go out of style. First, there are the reruns. Ever since the show ended, Little House has been playing steadily on cable channels, family networks, and streaming platforms. Generations who never watched it live have now fallen in love with it through Hallmark, UpTV, and modern platforms like Peacock and Amazon Prime. According to TV Insider and Prairie magazine, the series still attracts millions of views every year, proof that its messages of kindness, perseverance, and faith remain just as relevant today as they were in the 1970s and 80s. Little House wasn't flashy, and it didn't rely on special effects, trendy humor, or shock value. It made people feel seen, it made them cry, and most of all, it made them believe that even in the darkest times, goodness could still win. That's exactly what the show continues to do. However, the show didn't just stop at the screen. It inspired books, documentaries, and even stage plays. The original books by Laura Ingalls Wilder, on which the show was based, still sell around the world. Fans have carried their love for the series far beyond their TV screens, traveling to real-life historical sites like De Smet, South Dakota, and attending Little House festivals across the United States. Several celebrities, including the cast members themselves, have opened up about how Little House changed their lives. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura, became a celebrated author with her memoir, Back to the Prairie, and she's now a public figure. She also served as president of the Screen Actors Guild and recently embraced a quiet, grounded life in the Catskills, far from the hustle of L.A. In an interview with Southern Living, she revealed she had to get out of Los Angeles to return to the kind of life Little House represented, an authentic, simple, and real life. Also, Karen Grassel, the beloved Ma Ingalls, returned to theater work and opened up in her memoir about the challenges and triumphs behind the scenes. Allison Arngrim, who played the deliciously wicked Nellie Olson, wrote Confessions of a Prairie Bitch and found a second career in comedy and advocacy. Melissa Sue Anderson, who played Mary Ingalls, moved to Canada to focus on her family and published her memoir The Way I See It. In addition, the show won awards because, while it was humble in tone, the industry noticed. Little House on the Prairie was nominated for 17 Primetime Emmy Awards and won 4, including Outstanding Cinematography and Music Composition. It also earned 3 Golden Globe nominations, including Best Drama Series and acting nods for both Michael Landon and Melissa Gilbert. Michael Landon's writing, directing, and deep emotional storytelling elevated the show beyond mere family fare, and it became a cultural touchstone. Of course, no conversation about Little House is complete without honoring Michael Landon himself. After the series, he created Highway to Heaven, another emotionally rich show that focused on healing, kindness, and moral values. Landon became known not just as a talented actor, but as a creator who poured his heart into every story he told. His former co-stars still speak of him with deep respect. Dean Butler, who played Almanzo in the show, once said in People magazine that Landon never quite got the industry respect he deserved during his lifetime. Yet his impact was undeniable. In an age of constant reboots and reimagining, Little House stands untouched. Michael Landon made sure of that. He ended it on his terms so no one could dilute its meaning. And today, it's that purity, that unwavering commitment to emotional truth that keeps the show alive. It continues to teach, to heal, and to resonate. Do you think blowing up Walnut Grove was the right way to say goodbye? Or do you wish the show had ended differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.